A little different than last week. Obviously, the book of Judges, as we talked about, was rated R for violence and sexual content in that book. This one's completely the opposite. The book of Ruth is, I like to say, a Hallmark movie. My wife loves those. She watches these. Their little love stories, everything always works out great in the end. That's the book of Ruth.
But the book of Ruth doesn't have a dog.
No one falls in love with the dog.
Okay.
But you're right. This is a love letter. It's the name of the book of Ruth in the Hebrew Bible is also the Hebrew version of Ruth. So that it's going to be much like the first 5 books had the first important word naming the book. From here on out, a lot of the books are going to be the content. And that's the book of Ruth. It's the book of Ruth. Reut is her name in Hebrew, but that's the name of the Hebrew book. It means friendship or compassionate friendship. It's a strong Hebrew word meaning total dedication of a friend. And it's almost prophetic because that's exactly what she becomes to Naomi. In the book of Ruth, there's really only 2 books in the whole Bible that are named after a woman, and Ruth is one of them. Can anybody think of the second one?
That's Esther.
Yeah, Esther. Esther and Ruth are the only 2 books in the Bible named after a female. Not only that, but Ruth is the only book in the Old Testament named after a Gentile. And there's only 2 books in the Bible, the 66 books, that are named after a Gentile. Anybody know the second book that's named after a Gentile?
Would it be Job?
It's in the New Testament. Dr. Luke. Luke is Greek. So the only 2 books that actually have a name of a Gentile. Everybody else that's named after a person is from a Hebrew person, other than Ruth and Luke. So we think that, once again, like Judges, Ruth was written in the time of the Judges, which we're going to see. That's how it opens up in verse 1. We didn't know the author of Judges because it doesn't state. Ruth doesn't state it either, but it's strongly influenced that Samuel was the author. Samuel will be the next 2 books, 1st and 2nd Samuel, the next 2 books after Ruth. There's only 4. This is a very small book. Unlike Genesis 50 chapters, Exodus 40, the bigger books. Ruth is a very small but compact with a lot of information. So it's a really good book. And of course, the theme I chose was your people will be my people and your God will be my God. That's her statement. That's Ruth's statement of conversion, of faith in God. So that's how it's going to. Redemption, the one word I came up with was redemption, because that's actually, the book is all about the story of kinsman redeemer. We learned about kinsman redeemer in both the book of Leviticus and in the book of Deuteronomy. When we went through the laws, kinsman redeemer is one of the Jewish laws required. And we'll get into that when we're gonna look at that a lot when we're looking in there. I thought about some other words, providence, conversion, because it's actually a picture of a Moabite girl converting to believe in the one true God, the Judeo-Christian God. It's 4 chapters. It's broken up somewhat like in 2. The first half, you can break it up in half and then quarter. The first half is basically focused on Ruth and Naomi, and then the second half is Ruth and Boaz. So those are like your 2 halves, and then you can break them up in chapters 1 through 4. You have them in the land of Moab. In reality, they were in the land of Judea, went to Moab, and then back to Judea. So it's kind of a round trip thing, but the focus is when they're in the land of Moab. Then they're in the field of Boaz. Then they're in the threshing floor of Moab. And then they're in the house of Moab. I'm sorry, I said Moab. Change all those to Boaz. They came back from Moab. The timing of this is about 1000 BC. Remember that chart I did last week where it says from the fall of creation to Abraham is 2,000 years, from Abraham to the cross is 2,000? We're in the middle of that 2000 from Abraham to the cross, and at 1,000 years is probably off by 50, 60 yards, or 50, 60 years. But it's right there in the middle of that 2,000 year period from Abraham to the cross.
You know, if it's 50 yards, that's a different club.
Yeah, it is. Different measurement there, isn't it? The importance of this is twofold. One, so the timing drills down. Remember, this is the time of Judges. Ruth falls somewhere. All we know in the book is it says Ruth was during the time of the Judges. But historians, with the time, what's going on, place her towards the end of it. Probably the last judge is Samson, and she was probably during that time, and there was famine in the land, so they left. The importance of this is the lineage. You got, I got the little chart up here of the families. We're going to be looking at Naomi, her husband Elimelech, her two children, Ruth, Boaz, and then their children. And notice Ruth and Boaz end up having Obed, and then Obed has Jesse, and then Jesse has King David. So it shows you the book of Ruth's importance in the Bible. It's the only book in the Bible that ties the chronological lineage of King David, which ties Jesus, to the tribe of Judah, showing that the Messiah comes from the tribe of Judah. It was prophesied in Genesis that it was going to come from Judah. But if we didn't have the book of Ruth, we would not see this connection, the dots connected, where King David comes from the tribe of Judah, because, of course, Boaz and Naomi are from the tribe of Judah. What did I do? What's I read? Yeah. I went the wrong way, didn't I? I'm still going the wrong way. Yep. Let's get this straight. There you go. So, Ruth chapter 1 verse 1 is in the days when the judges ruled. So that kind of puts us in the time frame. There's a lot in this verse. This is verse 1. And we're going to have the when, where, who, and why. The 4 W's of understanding content, right? And the when was in the time of the judge, when the judges ruled. There was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judea, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. So we're going to kind of look at that real quickly here, though. But what do we get? In the time of Judges, when there was a famine. You remember last week when we went through with Judges, and there were those 8 cycles of apostasy? This is one of them, and it's probably the 8th apostasy during the time of Samson. And many of those apostasies brought famine on the land. That was his judgment to bring them back to cry to him, so that he would send a judge to save them. So there was a famine in the land, and it wasn't unusual for the Hebrew people to skedaddle out of the promised land whenever there was a famine, right? Abraham did it. He went to Egypt. Jacob did it, went to Egypt. So it wasn't uncommon that they run to foreign land when a famine occurred. We don't see any indication that they went to God and prayed about it, but they did. They left anyway. They went to Moab. So the name of the father was Elimelech, and his son the wife was Naomi, and his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. So we're going to look at the meaning of these names, and some of them are peculiar. So Elimelech is a great name. It means my God is king. And sometimes I heard someone teaching on this, and he kept saying, and I do it too, so I don't blame him. He would say Abimelech instead of Elimelech. They're very close in pronunciation, but they mean completely different things. And you remember Abimelech was in Judges, right? He was that right after Gideon. He was the son of Gideon, and he was a self-appointed king. He was the one where the woman threw the stone down and crushed him, and he didn't want to die by the hands of a woman. So that was Abimelech, a self-appointed king for 3 years. That means my father is king. That's why they kind of sound in a little bit how we pronounce them, because that king, Melchizedek, anything with the deck, is about a king, right? In the name. Well, Elimelech means my God is king. That's a great name. Naomi's got a great name. She's pleasant. I mean, delightful, pleasant. But when she comes back, she said, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara," which just means sorrow, or bitter. The two boys, though, the parents did not do them any favors. So Mahlon, his name is Sickness. So Mahlon is one of the sons, and he's the one that ends up marrying Ruth. And he's called Sickness, which is not a great name. And then Killian's not much better. It means wasting away. So they normally name their kids after a trait that they see. But sometimes I don't understand these. I would always do a positive trait, but then if I wrote the Bible, I'd only do positive stories too. I would never give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where, like we said, one of the great things about the Bible, we know it holds truth to its tone because it gives us the good, the bad, and the ugly. God does not hide things. He tells it how mankind is. So we're going to head out of here. My God is King, pleasant, sickness, and what's his wasting away are all heading to Moab. So I wanted to point this out because I was on the internet reading about some of these chapters, and I got this one, and this kid, and he was kid because he could have been more in his 20s. He had a commentary on this, and he was, this says a lot about the internet. You can't trust everything you read on the internet. I used to say, you got to remember what Abraham Lincoln said. You can't trust everything written on the internet, And that was my joke, Lincoln. So, but it's true. You got to watch what you get. And he was saying, and because of this verse here, in verse 2, it says, they were Ephrathites, okay? And he went on, so I'm reading it, and he goes, he was claiming that they were from the tribe of Ephraim. And I'm like, So I kept reading on, thinking, well, maybe he just misspoke, but it's in writing. And then he was expanding on it. It was it reminded me of AI, because AI will confidently tell you an error. AI sometimes gives you, I remember when I first started using it, I was doing Super Bowls because I knew Super Bowls, and I was asking about Super Bowl years and all, and it was giving me information. I'm thinking, I know Dallas won the Super Bowl, because it was giving me false information, but confidently giving you an order, number, and all. You have to watch out. It's gotten better. This was 2-3 years ago, but you got to watch out for it. That's the same thing with the internet. This guy was saying that they were Ephraim. I think that's impossible, because the whole importance of this is that it ties them to the tribe of Judah, not Ephraim. And I say that because the words sound a little bit alike. Ephrathites and Ephraimites. And an Ephraimite is just a clan that lives in Bethlehem. It's Bethlehem's a town, and we will find out that Elimelech and his family are from the Ephraimites, the Ephrathites. I'm sorry, Stephen. The Ephrathites, which is just a clan of family in Judea, in the tribe of Judah. So I wanted to point that out. Not that you guys are probably going to run across that one guy out there. It's the only one place I found it. But we get from Micah the understanding of what it means. It says, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathite, though you are small among the class of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be the ruler of Israel, whose origins are from ancient times. Of course, Micah is prophesying about Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ is going to come out of Bethlehem. Notice there's 2 Bethlehems. There's a great story. The map I happen to have has both the Bethlehems where they're located, but we know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Ephraim. So that's that. Why did I put this? Oh, I did with this too. So they were Ephrathites from the Bethlehem, Judea, and they went to Moab and lived there. And what I put this picture for is I want to kind of show you. So they're over here, just by Jerusalem in Bethlehem, and Bethlehem, of course, is the house of bread. So I thought the house of bread, and they're going to go to the trash can. Moab means my wash bin, and I wanted to show God describing it, David writing what God's description of it is in Psalms 108. Moab is my wash basin. And they're going to go from where God placed them, the house of bread, and they're going to go find their own solution in Moab, which was probably not what God would have had them do, but they did it, and God, he uses all things. We make those decisions. Every why we come to, remember, in a road, just because we make our decision in the why instead of God's decision, doesn't mean God doesn't start using us from that decision, and he's going to use them as well. We're going to see, in fact, he uses them to set up the lineage of Jesus Christ. But they are making their own decision to go there. Remember, Moab, if you remember Esau's descendants, this is Lot's descendants from his oldest daughter, and these are Lot's descendants from his younger daughter. And they're going to go to Lot's descendants there from his. And the other thing we'll point out is God told them not to interact in intermarriage with them, right? And they're going to do it anyway, but God's still going to bless them. See, because Ruth, and this, so big picture wise, you got to remember, Israel was chosen when God chose Abraham, and God chose Abraham to be a father of many nations and to bless. He remember the three promises that were going to come through Abraham. He was promised the land, the promised land. He was promised to be a father of many nations, of a multitude of people, and then he was promised to have the blessing come through his lineage, right? And would bless all nations. Israel was created to reach out to the world, to all the other nations, to show them God's ways. They didn't do a good job of that. The reason we as believers don't recognize that right away is because when you read the Bible, they didn't do a good job of it. But the purpose of the nation of Israel is the same purpose as the church. We're not here isolated for each other, even though we're supposed to care for each other. We're here to go out to the world and show them of Jesus Christ. Israel was the same thing. Israel's job was to show the other nations of God's love and mercy, to draw them to him, not to isolate themselves, even though they did. I have a problem of hitting the wrong button every time. So we get to chapter 3 now. Chapter 1, verse 3 and 4, 3 through 5. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died pretty quick, right? We're out of here, and he dies, and she was left with her 2 sons. Normally, your husband dies, you have sons, that's a good thing. The sons are going to take care of you. Unfortunately, we see in verse 4, that's not going to happen. They marry Moabite women, and one named Orpah, and the other named Ruth, and they had lived there for about 10 years. Now, we don't know if they've been married for 10 years. All we know is they lived in Moab for 10 years. They got married with Moabite women. Bible doesn't tell us any details. And then the 2 boys die. So now you've got Ruth with 2 daughter-in-laws, right? But no son and no husband. And of course, we could have almost predicted that by the boys' names, right? Sickly and wasting away. So.
Hey, and so it said they died, right?
Yeah, it does say, yeah, they died. It says they died. So the 2 boys, they died. And then, so now we have this story, and I'm not going to read these verses, but basically have the 3 of them. And Naomi recognized right away, you're Moabite women, you're young. I have no one to give you. She basically says you need to go back to your mother's and father's house and find yourself husbands who can take care of you. And they said, no, both of them protested at first and said, no, we want to stay with you. And she goes, look, I don't have a husband. Even if I did, if I had a child right now, what are you going to wait around for that child to get old enough? This brings in the Levirate marriage. So there's going to be 3 laws that we're going to be introduced here. There's going to be the law of gleaning, which is we'll find when we get to the threshing floor in the fields. There's going to be the law of the Levirate marriage, which has to do with in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. When we went through those books, God established the law and basically said, if your brother's wife dies, the next closest relative, normally your brother, is responsible to take your widow on as his wife until she has his first son. So you're to give her a son because it's all about the land, right? The land passes to the family. And In fact, there's a lot of law in here that I'm glad that we went over these things in Leviticus and Deuteronomy because, remember they divided up the land when they crossed. So each family, not only each of the 12 tribes, which they did too, each of the 12 tribes had the land. We saw that map, but also the different families inside those tribes had areas of land too. And the law was those land masses stayed in the family. And how they did that was through the law required, so every Jubilee, which is every 7 Sabbath or seven years, there's 7 sevens, which is the 7th Jubilee, 50 years, all the land returns back to the original owner. And it's the same thing we'll see as well in this story where I know slavery to us as we go, ooh, slavery. But what God did, because slavery has existed forever. I mean, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylon, everybody had slaves. God instituted rules on this, and he called it basically servitude. So let's say a brother had lost everything and wanted to sell his land. He could sell his land to someone, but you could only be indentured for 7 years, and not even 7. So there was a 7-year Sabbath. Remember that every 7 days there's a Sabbath, every 7 years there's a Sabbath. So every 7 years, if you're halfway through it, the 3.5-year mark, and you don't have any money, the person can buy your debt, and then you are indentured to him for 3.5 years. Because at the 7th year, God requires all debt to be forgiven, so no one would carry generational debt. This was God's way of not allowing generational debt to occur. And this also, I'm telling you, this foundation to introduce the, and I'm forgetting the word for it now, of kinsman redeemer, I'm sorry. So introduce the third law that I was talking about was the kinsman redeemer. And that's where someone would not only buy your debt, but also take care of the widow. So those three, we're going to see all three of those laws of gleaning, Levirate marriage, and kinsman redeemer come together in the story of Ruth. So basically, Naomi tells them to go back. Orpah does, but Ruth's adamant about I'm not leaving you. So this is where she makes her great statement here, where your people will be my people and your God will be my God. This is a picture of a conversion of a Moabite girl to Judaism. She's going to believe, and like I said before, the purpose of Judaism was not to be self-contained. It was to spread out to the world, all the other nations, to draw them to God. And here we have a picture of Ruth coming to God because of her love for Naomi. And of course, I'm sure she was exclaimed. We're not given the detail of a gospel message being given to her, but the results clearly show us that she understood what it meant, to go under the God of the I am, if lack of a better way of saying that. So Ruth commits to her. So the two women set out, and they go back, and they arrive in Bethlehem. And they basically, the townspeople, it's a small town. I grew up in a small town, and I knew everybody knew me, and if there was a stranger in town, we knew it, or if someone had left and come back, we knew it. Everybody knows everything in a small town. And this was a small town, small enough that they recognize Naomi's back in town, and they say, can this be Naomi? Why would they say that? Well, because she left with a husband and two boys. She's coming back with one Moabite girl. So can this be Naomi? And so she's back into the town. Of course, this is where she says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. Because basically she says, Almighty has made me very bitter. So she lost her husband and her 2 sons.
Mara must mean bitter.
Bitter. Yep. Mara means bitter. So, so I put this in there because there's little tidbits when you're reading through the Bible too, and you can read right over this statement, right? 22 tells us they arrive in Bethlehem during the barley harvest, as the barley harvest began. Remember those holy days or feasts that I put up there. We have 7 Moedims or 7 feasts, and the 3 feast and the 7 holy days. Well, the barley harvest is first fruits. Remember, you have Passover, you have unleavened bread, and then you have first fruits. That first fruits celebration was the barley harvest. 50 days later was Pentecost. That's the wheat harvest. So we know this was during the month of Nisan, and Nisan falls in March, April timeframe. So we know the time frame that she comes back during the barley harvest. So as she starts going to and it's not important per se to the ultimate thing, but it gives us not only the timeline when she was 1,000 years into that 2,000 year period, but it also gives us the time of the year she was at. She was at the month of Nisan around March during the barley harvest. This gets us to chapter 2, in the fields of Moab. Or, I want to keep saying, in the field of Boaz. This wasn't recorded. My verbal slips would not be as important.
Take what I mean, not what I say.
Yes, exactly. And like I tell my kids. Now, Naomi was had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So we get introduced to Boaz. This is, he's the third character of the story here in the book. And Ruth was a Moabite named, and Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, and let me basically go to the fields. And so this shows the character of Ruth, right? She's with Naomi, and while they don't have husbands, they don't have sons, Naomi's going to go out, and this kind of introduces to the first law I mentioned, the law of gleaning. In Leviticus and Deuteronomy reiterated, God told the harvesters, the owners of the land, to only go through one time. First, he says 2 things. He says, don't glean the corners, so don't get every corner of your, and don't go back over the second time. Leave the stuff that's fallen on the ground for the poor. This is the way, a law that God instituted to take care of the poor so people wouldn't starve. So that's what Ruth is going to do, basically. She's going to go out to a field, and you can go to anybody's field. None of them are supposed to be able to reject you, and she's going to glean from that. The second one will be the kinsman redeemer, and of course the Levirate marriage will be the third. So she's going to go out there, and it says, as it turns out, she was working in the field belonging to Boaz. I didn't say Moab. Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech, her father-in-law. So there were probably a number of fields out there. He wasn't the only owner of land in the town. But as it has it, Providence here has her land in the field of Boaz. So Boaz, she catches Boaz's eyes right away. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted his harvesters. The Lord be with you, and the Lord bless you, they answered. I put that up there just to show you the relationship. Boaz, I'm trying to build with little snippets of scripture the character of Ruth, the character of Naomi, and the character of Boaz, our 3 main characters, right? Because they were upright, righteous people. And it's evident that Boaz's workers got along with him. He got along with them. They both looked to God for their caring. And so Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, who is that young woman belong to? Or who does that one know? Tells us right away, Boaz, she catches Boaz's eye. And this is the Hallmark movie I'm saying. If you can visually kind of picture this thing coming out, you got a love story building, right? Right away, he goes, who is this?
Who is this beautiful creature?
That's exactly it.
This isn't in Christmas build like she is it? Let's make sure.
So Naomi says to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed. So she's basically talking about Boaz. And again, Naomi said to her, the man is our relative. And I put this in there because I'm saying he is one of our close relatives. This is the NIV. He is one of our close relatives. That close relatives is actually the word Gaul. And that means redeemer, kinsman redeemer, or avenger. I don't remember if you guys, because we probably didn't make a big point of it back when we were studying the law. The law, this one word carries more than just the kinsman, which Ruth focuses on the kinsman redeemer element of this word. But this word also is the same word that's used for the avenger, who would, if someone killed your brother or killed some close family member, it was your job in the clan to go revenge him and kill him. And that made the whole thing of God making sanctuary cities that you could run to, because if you accidentally killed someone in the heat of the moment, you didn't want to avenge, someone to take your life in anger. So if there's a whole system here, I'm trying to tell you though, that you'll probably have to read a little deeper to understand. But what we're focusing on in the book of Ruth is the kinsman redeemer element of it. And Naomi basically recognizes Boaz. She knows him. He's a family member. And she's telling Ruth, hey, you've landed in a field from one of our relatives, our close relatives, who is a kinsman redeemer of us. So, and this was back in, we get this from Leviticus 25, and we get it from Deuteronomy when Moses repeated it to the second generation. So this gets us, that was fast through chapter 2. Chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 1. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, my daughter, you must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. So basically what we have going on here is they've been back in Bethlehem for a while, and she's going out there gleaning, so they're not going hungry. She's gleaning from the field. But Naomi's going to play a little matchmaker here. She's basically saying, it's not good for you not to have a provider, right? So she's going to maneuver here to get, she's going to be playing matchmaker. This goes back to Hallmark. Mother-in-law is going to set up and become matchmaker for Boaz and Ruth. Now, Boaz, with whose woman you have been working, is a relative of ours. Tonight, he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor when he's throwing it up in the air and having the chaff blow away and the barley fall into the ground. And so Naomi basically tells Ruth, look, you've been in mourning for my son long enough. It's great, and I'm sure, tradition is they wear all black. They don't put a lot of makeup on. They don't, they're not hunting, courting, whatever, they're not looking for a husband. But Naomi's gonna fix that. She's gonna say, wash, put on perfume, and get dressed. Probably saying, remember that little pretty dress you were wearing when my son caught your eye? Put that dress back on, So she tells her to basically set up and clean up, put your perfume on, put your best clothes on, and when he's finished eating and drinking, go to him. So she's gonna guide Ruth through how to attract Boaz, which I think, as you read that, doesn't need a lot of work because she's already caught his eye, not even doing that. So now
He's the original Yinfa.
yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't see that. Is that?
Matchmaker.
Oh,
Fiddler on the roof.
oh, okay, well, okay. So 4 and 5, and then she basically, Naomi goes on and says, when he lies down, note the place where he's lying down, then go and uncover his feet. This is strange to us. There's not only are the 3 laws I mentioned strange to us because we don't have those laws, right? Those aren't laws of ours. It wouldn't hurt us to have those laws, but we don't have those laws. But this is another strange custom, right? And it's a custom of availability. So she tells Ruth to go to Boaz, and when he lies down, uncover his feet and lie there. So that's basically telling him you're interested and available. So basically, when Boaz had finished eating and drinking, he was in the good spirit, which obviously we know. I mean, getting drunk's a sin, but they drank alcohol. They drank alcohol in the Old Testament. Jesus turned wine in the New Testament to alcohol. Alcohol's not a sin, as some would think, but drinking and getting drunk is a sin. Carousing is a sin. There is sin element to it, but drinking alcohol is not a sin. It's throughout the Bible. Ruth approaches him quietly, uncovers his feet, and lies down. In the middle of the night, something startles the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Okay, who are you? He asked. And then, of course, she says, I'm your servant, Ruth. She said, spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. So basically, she uncovered his feet, saying, I'm available. He recognizes her down there, and he accepts this. So this is a courtship that's going on. Not like our courtships. We don't understand this at all because we don't do it this way, but it's a courtship that's going on. And she presents her availability. He accepts her availability and says, I will cover you.
Well, I'm like, times have changed.
Yeah.
Instead of Steve saying, would you like to have dinner with me? Would you like to lay at my feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, walk it.
Of course,
Yeah.
they got married before they did anything funny, you know.
Yes,
Of
yes.
course.
They definitely did. And in fact, these next verses are going to talk about she woke up and she left before anybody noticed, because obviously there were things that the people weren't perfect back then. They did sleep around. They did. We had prostitutes, we've got multiple prostitutes throughout the book, but they wanted to make sure that no one thought nothing went on. So they kept it above board. So, where am I here? Okay. So basically what we're going to have here is, let's just read it. This kindness is greater than that which you've showed earlier. So we see this buildup of Ruth showing this kindness to Boaz. You have not run after younger men. This goes into that, or richer, for I guess some women they're without a husband, their husband died. They might be aggressive at trying to get just any man to cover them, right? Any man. And she didn't. She was very humble. She was working the fields. We don't know for how long, but before she approached Boaz, she was not chasing after younger men, rich or poor, which wasn't always the case, evidently. So then, and he talks about the whole town knowing her character. We're kind of building up the character of all three of these, Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of your family, there's another who is more closely related than me. So this tells us a lot about Boaz. How did he know? I mean, he must have done a little research or known, So she approaches him and asks him to be her kinsman redeemer. And he said, I will, but you actually have a closer, under the law, the closest kinsman redeemer has the first right of refusal. So he knew that he wasn't the primary one. So what he does is he tells her to stay here, in the night. And then basically when they wake up, he gives her gifts for Naomi. He says, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. So he gives her more food than having to go glean it herself. He actually gives it to her and says, go back to your mother-in-law with that. And because he's got some business to conduct, right? So he's got to take care of some business. So did I get ahead of myself? So she laid at his feet till morning. This is what I already said, yeah. But she left so that no one would think anything wrong. No one would know she was at the threshing floor. And he said, bring me your shawl. Bring me your shawl and hold it out. And this is where he gives her 6 measures of barley to take home to Naomi. And then Ruth came back to her mother-in-law and she asked, well, how'd it go? Because I'm sure Naomi set this all up, and she said, okay, how'd it go? And Ruth comes back and she explains how everything went and everything. Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her. And he added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Okay. And then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled. So she already knows, for lack of a better way of saying it, Boaz is hooked. Boaz wants her, and he's let her know what he's got to do. So she goes, don't do anything, just wait. Let Boaz do what Boaz has to do. And so that gets us to chapter 4. This is the last chapter. And what Boaz does is, he knows legally he has to offer this kinsman redeemer offer to the closest relative. So he gathers a bunch of people. The gates of the city were where they conducted legal matters. And so they're at the gates of the city of Bethlehem. And he goes to the elders, and then he basically tells the kinsman redeemer, look, we have a situation here where Naomi needs to sell her land. Are you interested in redeeming this land? And what's he say? Down here, I'll redeem it. He goes, sure, I'll redeem the land. I'm sure he's got land, but he's thinking, I can always expand and add to my land. So the kinsman redeemer says this, I'll redeem it. And then Boaz pulls his ace out of his sleeve and says, okay. Then Boaz says, on the day that you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite. Now, this is not something the kinsman redeemer was thinking about. And he says, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. And this is what he wanted all along. Yeah. He wanted all along. So he kind of gets his way in this Hallmark movie. He's negotiating the thing. That's how I'm picturing this whole thing. So he's basically saying, you have to have Ruth as well. And the man's probably married, the first redeemer. We don't even know his name. The closest relative of the redeemer, kinsman, we don't know his name. The Bible doesn't tell him. But he basically says, no, I'll jeopardize my estate. So you got to think he's probably married with kids. He's got allotments already planned out. His will's already made up. And this added mix would confuse and so he rejects his responsibility. They go to this really weird thing here where this is another thing where we don't understand. We would shake hands, write a contract, but they have this thing where they take their sandal off. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself and redeem. Oh, and he removed his sandal. This is a custom that we, like I said, we just don't understand. But in the law, if we go back and read the detail of the law, if someone came to you and you're their closest kinsman redeemer and you wanted to approach them as your kinsman redeemer, if they refused to, they took their sandal off as a sign of shame and gave it to you. And then that's them rejecting, much like when she uncovered his feet and he accepted that was him accepting the responsibility as kinsman redeemer. And the sandal, taking off the sandal, is a rejection of that. And that's how the Bible says. And it has to do, like I said, it's a weird thing of rejecting a contract, basically, and there's a shame element to it, because you're not stepping up to your responsibility. So that goes on. But the important thing here is Boaz wanted that done at the gates of the city because he wanted all the town's leaders, the elders, to see that. This is a legal passing of that responsibility. Boaz did not want anybody to come back later and be able to redeem that. He wanted this to be done in front of the elders. He wanted it to be binding, and that's what this represents, a binding agreement and contract to have him have the rights to kinsman redeemer of Ruth and Naomi.
They just walk around with one sandal on from then on, I guess.
It doesn't say, but it probably they have to go get their other shoe, right?
They go back to the house
they're minus a sandal. Whether they take the other one off or not, I don't know. But you do give that sandal. That's looking at that the same way. I'm thinking, what do you do? What do you remember? When sandals up. So, yeah.
I have a serious question instead of a stupid comment this time. Okay, so
He's stupid.
thank you, Doug. So Ruth was a Moabite. She was a Gentile.
Yeah.
So it was more typical for a Jew to, not marry outside of Judaism. So obviously it was okay, or the book wouldn't be in the Bible. So why was it okay for him to want to marry Ruth, a Gentile, and not another Jewish lady? Is it because she was married to the?
That's exactly right.
The lineage right there.
Because she was married to a Jew?
Yes. So yeah, while you're right, they did try to stay. So there's two things I want to point out here. One is God did have them married other tribes inside to keep them, as a nation. Instead of, he didn't want them marrying Canaanites and all this to mix. Normally, because what happens when they did that is they brought in the foreign gods too. And that's the reason why they didn't want to mix marriage. But with that said, I said it earlier, the nation of Israel was not supposed to be self-contained. They were supposed to be a light on the hilltop, just like the church, salt of the world, just like the church. They were supposed to draw those people to the God of Israel. And she did. Exactly what they were supposed to do happened to her. She became a religious Jew, not by heritage, but by conversion. And that's what was supposed to happen. But you're exactly, the legal right, even if they did marry outside the tribes, was the husband retained the land. And she had to give him a son that land would pass on to. Even though she was foreign, it was her responsibility to give that son. So that's what this whole picture is about. But yes, they married outside. Normally when people converted, we don't have an indication of her converting before the marriage, but she definitely, after the death of her husband, converted. So
Yeah, because technically it was Malon that married her, right?
yes,
So technically he was going outside of what God had commanded. But that brought her in so that Boaz could then marry her without going outside of.
right. That's exactly what we're doing. So Boaz is not doing it wrong.
Paradox of the law. We can't ever satisfy the full law.
Right. No, you're exactly right. In fact, the picture of what's going on here, that's a great point, because the picture of what's going on here is her first kinsman redeemer was by law the one that should have restored her. Okay. Restoration should have come by the law through the first kinsman redeemer. But from grace and love is what Boaz is a picture of. So you got the unnamed law that could not redeem her, but love and grace through Boaz, his motivation, could redeem her. And it's a picture of what the law could not do, grace and love does. And that's kind of the overarching message of this Hallmark movie of Ruth.
Well, it's because the legal things were through the male,
Right.
but she, by cunning and staying with Naomi and becoming Naomi's God, becoming her God,
Right.
then, we got to get that Moab woman, but he was seeing her as someone who was already complete and converted.
Exactly. Boaz was, for sure. So we got a lot of pictures going on here. Ruth, the book of Ruth is full of imagery. And we've got the imagery of the first kinsman redeemer representing the law, Boaz representing grace, Ruth representing a conversion, that the message of love and grace that Boaz represents doesn't just contain in the 12 tribes, it goes outside to the Gentiles. A lot of picture imagery in this story showing what Christ did for the world, right? Because for God so loved the world, not just Israel, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever should believe in him shall have everlasting life. So shall not perish, but have everlasting life. So
Or this is that they weren't supposed to have multiple wives. That wasn't God's original plan. So if this guy was already married, he couldn't get this kinsman is redeemed
Other
part
than-
and be married to other people. Culturally it was acceptable.
no, so you're exactly right. Culturally, multiple wives is accepted, but God did not want you to have multiple wives. But the law allowed it superseded the fact. So you were supposed to be married to one man and one woman. But if your brother's wife died, the law did say, even if you're married, you take her and give her a child, a son, but that's not yours. That the name and lineage of that newborn boy does not belong to you. It belongs to your brother. So the law allowed for that, even though, so while you were in our culture, you had two wives, in their mindset, you did not have two wives. You were doing your kinsman responsibility to give her a line, right?
To keep that brother in the
lines, that his name would not be wiped out. So the Bible kept for that, and it did not look at that as having as monogamy, as having two wives. It didn't look at it that way. We do, in our mind, we would say, well, of course that's two wives, right? But in their mind, it was not two wives, even though we have lots of examples in the Kings as we get to the Kings of multiple wives, which is wrong.
And I just want to add another side point from a cultural amalgamation standpoint too. She had to adopt and assimilate to them to be accepted into the culture. And I only bring that up because today there's all these people decrying like, well, America, we should just, the Bible says taking everyone. It's like, be careful with that.
Yes, that's true. She had to be
You're not going to assimilate
one of them.
and come in.
Yes, exactly. She did not. In fact, the whole point of not taking foreign wives because God did not want them to assimilate to the foreign gods, and so the right way of doing that is for them to convert and come to God's way, not the world's way. Christianity is the same way, right? You can dilute the body of Christ, church, if you allow people who are willing to accept Jesus Christ, death, burial, and resurrection, and are born again. If a church all of a sudden has 51% plus of unsaved people in it, then all of a sudden it's not a church anymore. And that's the same problem Israel had. If Israel became looking at all these foreign gods, there would be no nation of Israel anymore, right? So that was God trying to protect it. We're ambassadors. We live in a foreign country as ambassadors of Jesus Christ. We're not supposed to be of the world, but we're supposed to live in the world. So there's this balance, and that picture of what the churches should be doing and what Israel should be doing is almost identical, right? One based under the law, one based under the law of the heart, grace. And Romans, of course, says, I know I'm sure you guys have already read this right now, for what the law was powerless to do because it was weakened by us, by our flesh, God did by sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be the sin offering. And so he condemns sin in the flesh. So, like I said, we kind of just already talked about that, but this whole thing is a picture of this. This whole book is a picture of this. So that gets us to chapter 4, verse 10. And this is the marriage. This brings in the third law. So we had the gleaning law that Ruth took advantage of first, that she fed her mother-in-law and herself using the law of gleaning. Then we had the kinsman redeemer law, and now we have the Levirate marriage law, which we talked about as well, where you continue the family of the dead son by taking the wife on and giving her a child. And of course, this Deuteronomy 25, it was also Leviticus, but talks about these laws and the responsibilities of the person taking these laws up. So 10 basically says, I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. It goes hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So that is his name his name will not be disappeared from among the family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses. So he's basically just finished this statement up with all the townspeople, with all the elders. He's at the gates of the city, and he's conducting the business, finalizing the business. And this is going to close out basically with then the elders and all the people at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord this is interesting, may the Lord make the woman, Ruth, who is coming into your home as Rachel and Leah. Remember Rachel and Leah, Jacob's two wives. That's where all the 12 and their handmaids, all 12 of the tribes of Israel came from. And then down here at the bottom, it also says, may your family be like Perez, whom Tamar bore from Judah. It's interesting, the two references that this thing uses. The townspeople are hearkening back to two examples in the Old Testament and saying, may your marriage with this Moabite girl, Ruth, be blessed like Rachel and Leah, as well as Tamar and Judah. And I have, remember the story of Tamar and Judah. If you don't remember it, because I went through this very quick in the book of Genesis, but Judah, the fourth son of Jacob, had 3 sons. He gave Tamar his oldest son. They married. His oldest son married Tamar. He died. So it fell the responsibility of kinsman redeemer to his brother, his second in line. She married his second son. He died. And Judah had a third son, but he was too young for marriage. So Judah said, look, when he's old enough, I will give you him in marriage. Well, time went by. He was old enough, but Judah did not do her right and did not fulfill the kinsman redeemer, and he kept his third son. I don't know what he's thinking though, black widow or whatever. Two strikes and you're out. I'm not giving you my third son. So he did not give the third son. And so what she did was he was going into town, so she went out ahead, set up a tent in the corner right out on the outskirts of town, and put a veil over and acted as a prostitute. Shows you wrongness here, but Judah went by, saw her, and took her services on, and laid with her, and she got pregnant. He didn't know it. So time went on. They both go back to town. No, and actually, he didn't have enough. He didn't have the required cost. A young goat was what she charged. He didn't have one, so he said, "I'll bring you one tomorrow." And she goes, "Well, I need proof. So give me your staff and your seal, and then you can bring me the payment tomorrow." He gives his staff and his seal, and he goes. When he comes back the next day to pay her tent's gone. He goes into the townspeople and say, "Hey, where's the prostitute that sets up right now?" We don't know what shaman. There's no prostitute that ever sets up there. So it's a mystery to him. Time goes on. 7, 8 months later, whatever it was, 6, 7, she's showing. Townspeople bring her to Judah and say, "Hey, she's pregnant." And of course, she's not married. So he goes, "Well, we're going to stone her and the man. Go find the man." And so, or say, "Who's the man?" And she brings out his staff and his seal. And he goes pale, right? Because he realizes, "I'm the father." And and he basically tells all the townspeople, "I was wrong. I owed her, I owed her a kinsman redeemer responsibility, and I did not." And so they basically, he takes her in and raises her, and takes care of her as her kinsman redeemer. And I put the lineage up there because the Bible's very interesting. Like we've said this in the past, the Bible doesn't just show our heroes are good. Look at who's in Jesus's lineage. You got Tamar, who we just told the story, who rightly got what was right to her, but in a very deceitful way, right? Of disguising as a prostitute. Of course, Judah going to a prostitute, that's a whole nother story, issue we got to talk about. So we got her in the lineage, but then you have Rahab, who we know was a prostitute in Jericho, right? But saved the two spies, and of course they blessed her. She ends up being the mother of Boaz, and then Boaz takes Ruth on, the Moabite girl. So we got Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth, all interesting characters in Christ's lineage. So
Takes all kinds.
Huh?
It takes all kinds.
It takes all kinds. God uses all kinds, right? That's the big message, is God does not use the perfect. He uses the willing. And if we don't have to be mighty, we don't have to be great, smart, rich, poor, whatever. We just have to be willing, and God will use us. So that gets us to
Have a good one, guys.
Yeah.
Enjoy your grandchildren.
trend. Yep.
It was really
Really?
I can't listen to stuff anymore.
I'm out of here.
So this brings us to the end of the book of Ruth here, and Boaz takes Ruth in. They end up having a child. He fulfills his kinsman redeemer, and Naomi gets her grandchild. Every parent wants a grandchild. Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So that kind of shows that lineage, where it closes out here. If we had a lot of, and then the final verses in the book of Ruth, of course, list that lineage that I showed you there from Perez all the way to King David. The interesting thing about it, I could pick lots of New Testament scriptures. There are a number of New Testament scriptures that reference back to the book of Ruth, and that kinsman redeeming act that was fulfilled, what Christ did for us. But here's Galatians. It just says, "But when the set time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoptions as sons." So God, Jesus Christ, I just put a few of the requirements to be a kinsman redeemer that Jesus fulfills, but all throughout the New Testament, it has references of Christ being our kinsman redeemer. He's adopting us into his family, So we are going to go through all of those. If you take these really slow, each chapter, we could have taken examples from the New Testament that reference those 4 chapters in the Old Testament. So it was good. Any questions?